I became richer than Bill Gates.
Wow. Did that upset him or?
No, before I told to anybody else, our stock started crashing.
Okay.
So in 6 months after that, our share price went down 99%. So we almost went bankrupt.
At the height of the dot-com bubble in late 1999 and early 2000, Masayoshi Son's net worth was surging by $10 billion a week. For 3 days, he was the richest person in the world. But before Son had a chance to tell anyone, shares of SoftBank Group Corporation crashed. The company's share plunged 75% in 2 months and were 93% lower at the end of 2000. The business almost went bankrupt. Masayoshi Son lost nearly all of his wealth. Hi and welcome back to another episode of Startup Division. In this episode, we are going to look at Japan's most famous entrepreneur, Masayoshi Son, the founder and CEO of SoftBank Group Corporation. We often hear rags to riches story of great entrepreneurs, but we don't hear much often of people who nearly lost all of their wealth but again got back on their own feet. Somehow, I survived. Masayoshi Son said in an interview on the David Rubenstein show, at that time, he said, now is the time to go next stage, which is the mobile internet. This is an incredible story of Japanese tech billionaire who is known to have lost 97% of his wealth during the dot-com crash. The CEO who lost $70 billion in a day before conquering the whole world. Masayoshi Son has made his reputation by going against the flow. In an extraordinary career, Son has lost and won a series of huge bets on the way to becoming the first or second richest man in Japan, depending upon which poll you read. In the dot-com crash, he lost $70 billion before rebuilding to the point that he was able to buy SoftBank from Vodafone and later acquire one of the US's big three networks, Sprint Corporation. Masayoshi Son makes brash statements. He is a celebrity with the most Twitter followers in his home country. To repeat, his behavior is not typically Japanese. But then, Masayoshi Son himself is, strictly speaking, not actually Japanese either. He is Korean. Son was born in Tosu on the Japanese island of Kyushu to a very poor Korean family. His father scraped a living as a fisherman. In the 1960s, discrimination against Korean immigrants was rife, and the young Son recalls being pelted with stones by Japanese classmates at school. Maybe this gave him some inner steel and the resolve to prove himself. Either way, Masayoshi Son soon displayed the relentless curiosity and energy that marks out all entrepreneurs. As a young man, he agitated for a meeting with his hero, McDonald's Japan founder Den Fujita, who advised him to learn English and study in the US. So, Son moved to San Francisco and enrolled in high school, then enrolled at the University of California at Berkeley to study computer science and economics. He was already interested in computers, and legend has it that Son carried with him a cutout newspaper picture of a microchip with him at all times. When not studying, Son was thinking of business ideas. He decided to come up with one idea a day and even hired a fellow student to be his stand-in at lectures when some business matter called him away. Inevitably, Masayoshi Son was going to make a fortune, and it came when he hired a scientist to help him build a voice-operated multilingual translator, which he later sold to Sharp for $450,000 US. With that money, he set up another business importing Space Invader game machines from Japan and leasing them across the Berkeley campus. When he returned to Japan in 1980, one would assume the stage was set for immediate glory. Instead, Masayoshi Son mooched around for 18 months, thinking and reading. He drove his family mad, but he was adamant that the next venture would be a big one. Masayoshi Son began thinking about computer software. He noticed how easy it was to buy hardware and how much software seemed to be available. And yet, hardly anyone seemed to be selling it, at least not professionally and at retail. So, Masayoshi Son used $80,000 in savings to create SoftBank Corporation. His first project was an utter disaster. Aware of the lack of distribution, Son hired a huge stand at a consumer electronics expo. He then gave Japan's top software makers free space on it and drew crowds with a huge sign that said, "Now the revolution has come for software distribution for PCs." The stand was permanently packed with delegates. It was the hit of the show. Problem was, no one wanted to do business with SoftBank. Instead, visiting retailers swapped cards with the publisher and signed their own direct deals. Masayoshi Son reckons he made back 1/20th of the cost of the booth. He resolved to keep going, but the odds were strongly against SoftBank. Then, fate intervened. He was phoned by someone from a shop called Joshin Tenki. They needed software and asked him to come to Tokyo for a meeting, but he couldn't. He told them he was too busy. In fact, he didn't have the money. Son didn't realize that Joshin Tenki was in fact the third largest home electronics dealer in Japan. Mercifully, they called again to say the company president would be going to Tokyo anyway. In reality, the trip was arranged solely to see Masayoshi Son. Joshin Denki had just set up a computer shop and desperately needed more software. The conversation that followed reveals everything about Son's audacity. Rather than leap gratefully at such an opportunity, Masayoshi Son advised his visitor that Joshin Denki would have to let go its existing suppliers and trade exclusively with SoftBank. Why? Because his dedication to software would take Joshin Denki to the top. If you want to be the #1 PC dealer in Japan, you have to find the #1 guy in software distribution. And that's me, he said. Amazingly, his impertinence worked. Other deals swiftly followed for both retail and publishers. In a year, SoftBank's monthly revenues went from $10,000 to $2.3 million. By 1984, SoftBank owned 50% of Japan's retail market for computer software, meaning its relentless CEO was exploring other business lines. The firm moved into telephone rerouting devices, magazine publishing, and broadband internet service. Son loved to buy and sell, throwing money into 600 technology companies, including GeoCities, Ziff Davis Publishing, and the Comdex Computer Show. Some of these bets went disastrously wrong, such as Kingston Technologies, which lost SoftBank $1 billion. Ziff Davis CEO Eric introduced Son to a struggling small company called Yahoo, which wanted $5 million to develop its search engine technology. Famously, Masayoshi Son offered $100 million. Yahoo founder Jerry Yang replied that they didn't need that much, to which Son countered, "Everyone needs $100 million. Thus, SoftBank owned more than 1/3 of Yahoo when it went public in April 1996. Masayoshi Son was similarly very persistent about Alibaba too, offering a big sum to its CEO Jack Ma when he hadn't even asked for it. As a result, SoftBank got 1/3 of Alibaba, a stake worth $75 billion on the day that Chinese giant IPO'd. SoftBank's $20 million investment in Alibaba back in 2000 probably ranks as one of the greatest ever. An astute eye for potential wasn't the only thing propelling Son to the top. He was also extraordinarily good at networking. Son met good friends of Bill Gates and Larry Ellison, relationships that would help SoftBank enormously. But perhaps the best bit of friend making was with Steve Jobs. In another story that is turned into legend, Masayoshi Son claims he visited Jobs to present the Apple boss with a drawing of mobile-enabled iPod. Jobs threw it back, laughing that he didn't need a shitty little drawing. Apple was working on its own. So, Son said, well, I don't need to give you my dirty paper, but once you have your product, give it to me for Japan. Jobs agreed. He had nothing to lose. The iPhone didn't even exist, and Son didn't own a mobile network at that time. But he soon would. SoftBank would buy out and rename Vodafone Japan's network in late 2006. Months later, he had the iPhone exclusive. That sounds great now, but in 2007, the device wasn't such a sure thing. Traditionally, Japanese chose handsets by local OEMs, otherwise known as original equipment manufacturers like Fuji, Panasonic and Sony. Also, the iPhone lacked crucial features. There was no QR code reader. The Safari browser didn't work with dedicated Japanese mobile sites. There was no support for SMS. SoftBank's solution was to steamroller the phone into users' hands, offering it for free with cheap unlimited data packages. And it worked. The iPhone became Japan's most popular handset, and SoftBank raised its subscriber base from 16 million to 35 million. SoftBank's core business are telecommunications within Japan and through its controlling stake in Sprint. But it also draws in revenue for other technology businesses. The Japanese tech giant has made a number of prominent investments recently, including last year's acquisition of UK-based chipmaker ARM for $32 billion, a $4 billion stake in US chipmaker Nvidia this year, and a newly announced $2.5 billion boost to Indian e-commerce player Flipkart. In May, the fund announced it had closed $93 billion in capital and that it hopes to raise $100 billion by the end of the year. Even beyond that, SoftBank has also many investments separate from the Vision Fund. For example, it acquired a controlling stake in US telecommunications firm Sprint for about $36 billion between 2012 and 2013. Son was also an early investor in Yahoo and Alibaba when the latter's evaluation was below 100 million according to investors. All of those deals fall into one of the two categories: cutting-edge technology or tech companies that are already in number 1 or number 2 in their category. Son, who founded SoftBank in 1980s, has grand visions of what technological advancements the future holds, and he prefers to chart his course with mid to long-term plans to achieve certain targets. At the age of 19, he created a 50-year life plan for his entrepreneurial ambition, setting himself targets for each decade to build up SoftBank into tech giant that it is today. He also created a 300-year-old plan for it to continue growing as a corporation. While those goals may still be far off from being realized, SoftBank subsidiaries as well as companies in which it's invested are pushing the frontiers of technology in areas such as the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and deep learning. For example, SoftBank's robotics created Pepper, a robot capable of reading emotions and interacting with human beings, and teamed up with Alibaba and Foxconn to bring it to global markets. In July, SoftBank was a part of a group of companies that invested $159 million into US car technology startup Noto. The Palo Alto, California-based company makes cameras that can track driver behavior in real time and know if they are distracted. Meanwhile, SoftBank also holds a stake in Chinese ride-hailing company Didi, which is looking at artificial intelligence in security and intelligent driving technologies in a new research lab in Silicon Valley. Given how rapidly technology is shaking up the industry, no one knows what the next business model is going to be, something Son is trying to discover. So we leave it right here, guys. If you did like the video, please do give it a big thumbs up, share and subscribe for more videos. Do follow us on social media. We'll be leaving the links in the description down below. Tell us in the comment section what you think of this video. If you have any special requests about specific companies that you want us to make videos on, message us on Facebook or simply comment down below. Till then, see you next time.